Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, maybe for some. My name's Dean Clayton and from the product management team. And today in our SMAX user group session, we're going to do a little bit of a spotlight on what we're calling beyond the box configuration tips and tricks. And for today's session, we've got Neville Ward from the UK, who's going to go into a little bit of details and cover this particular session. Just move to the next slide, please. So as is always with our SMAX user group sessions, we typically do it across three different types of topics. We have our office hours where we have it's an open session, obviously where you can ask questions and hopefully engage with product experts and obviously your peers. We also do our quarterly release readiness sessions as well. And then we do our feature spotlights, which this one today is where we'll do obviously focus on certain capabilities within the product and potentially give you some best practices and demos and tips to help you move forward on how you can utilize SMAX. Links obviously there, which obviously you've shared. Hopefully you've had no trouble because you're attending this session, but please feel free to share them wide with the rest of your organization, whether that you're part of Micro Focus partners, whether you're customers, and obviously the administrators that you work with. Okay. Next slide. Audio options for this session are obviously available, so you should be able to use your computer audio, but you can also dial in should you need to. I think the way that we're going to run this particular session is Nev's going to go through, talk about his experience, but we'll obviously feel free to post questions as we go. And if we've got time for a bit of Q&A and some of the topics that get brought up, we'll happily do that as part of the session.
Okay, over to me then.
Yeah, over to you, Nev. I'm really looking forward to this. So I have a list of questions for you later on if you don't answer them. So be prepared.
Okay, I look forward to it. So hello everyone. As Dean introduced me, I'm Neville Ward. I'm based in the UK. I've known Dean for a long time, so I've put up with his jokes for a long time as well. So when Dean and Brendusa asked me to do a session in the user group, I decided to talk about a topic which is quite close to my heart, which is availability management. Why is it close to my heart is I've kind of worked in this area for a long time, not just in I'm part of the pre-sales team, but not just in pre-sales. I've had real jobs in the past, actually doing and delivering this stuff. And what I wanted to do in the session today is not really just give you an overview of the app. And yes, we have developed an app, and I'm going to talk about version 2 of that. And I don't really want to go through how to create an app in Studio or anything like that. I really want to take it from a slightly different angle and really think of the anatomy of this app and focus on some of the design principles, what I wanted to achieve, and how I kind of went about it, and also kind of some of the challenges which I think were the interesting challenges to overcome, not just from a configuration point of view, but really thinking about that design as a whole as well. So I will introduce you to a number of different record types and how those kind of record types within SMAX interact with each other to deliver, what we wanted to set out, what I wanted to set out to achieve. I'm going to focus on a few of those configuration bits. Again, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail around, the actual business rules. If you want more information, you can contact me or contact Dean and Brendusa, etc., and we can talk about those in more detail. But it was more the concepts and the overview I want to get across today. So I guess the first thing to say about availability is, in my experience, availability means a lot of different things to a lot of different people and a lot of different organizations. Some people like to, measure availability in terms of outage time, and those outages may be calculated as a result of an incident, a major incident. Some people may want to consider change into that as well. If it's an unplanned change, does that count as an outage? In terms of kind of measuring availability, The classical way that's been around for a number of years is people tend to measure it in terms of percentage. So, if I calculate how many how many hours availability I need to deliver, how am I doing against that particular target? So often very much expressed around the availability. My experience, as I say, is everyone kind of does it different. Everyone has a slightly different interpretation of it. So one of the things that I wanted to do when I went about creating this application was to make it as flexible as possible. So not to make it too rigid in how I built it, and how it may be reliant on a particular incident, a record type like an incident. I wanted to be flexible. I didn't want to really hard code anything into it, meaning that when this gets published on the marketplace, and I'm talking about version 2 of the app, there's a version 1 already out there, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, to make it available for people to adopt and adapt it to how they consider and they want to measure availability. So these are some of the things I'm going to go through, some of the design principles. I'm going to talk about some of the records, going to show you how this all fits together, why it fits together, why I fitted it in this way, and some of the configurations like scheduling, actually calculating an availability percentage using a business rule. So I'm going to talk about that as well, and some other bits and pieces. As I say, this is going to be version 2 of the Availability Management app, which we published in due course. So just want to start with the objective of what I set out to achieve when I started thinking about this app. Really, the purpose, as it states here, is monitoring and reporting the availability of an actual service against a defined target, percentage of minutes, by recording outage minutes against the actual service. So doing it in a very classical way in terms of defining an availability target, determining what that is in terms of uptime minutes, allowed outage minutes, and using that to calculate that. And using the feed of outage minutes, I'll talk about the outage record in a few minutes, to actually calculate that. So thereby calculating the availability of the service and providing a year-to-date or month-to-date report. Actually, I've got the flexibility to do it on a daily basis, a weekly basis, a 6-monthly basis as well. So I'll talk about how we went about that. Now, primary thing I'm measuring against is the actual service. But again, the way I've designed this, you could record availability against different entities if you wanted as well. So service elements, service components, or actually devices. Maybe if you had, you were worried about a particular asset or device type, you may want to maybe measure the availability against those for a period of time. Maybe it's information that you could then use back to your suppliers, etc. So again, really built to be flexible, but very much built around this concept of measuring and reporting against percentage availability based on outage. So going down to the next level, so the concept. So the concept came up with was to actually achieve this was actually to create 3 records. The first record being the outage record. The outage record is actually what's in the Availability Management app version 1, which is available today. And that's a very simple record, and that can be generated via a business rule in incident or change. Why I didn't hard code that is because different people have, again, different criteria for when they may want to count an outage against availability. Also considering that you may have an incident or a major incident that actually impacts multiple services. So if you just had one incident to outage record, that might not be sufficient. So hence, I didn't want to put that hard business rule in there, but certainly you could do that and base it on a criteria. Change as well. So if you have an unplanned change or the change runs over its allotted time, do you want to count that? Do you want to count that as an outage? So giving the option to do that. And there are probably other options that you may want to consider as well. And the record is very simple. It really calculates, you know, from the start time to the end time, calculates minutes. Okay, and it's that outage minutes, that outage time, which we then use to calculate. So the next record I'm going to talk about, and this will become a bit clearer. I've got a picture coming up in a slide. Is something that I call the availability record, and the availability record is a control record, and this is where we record the target. So what is the target for this particular service? So what service is this against, and what's the target? What's the allowed? What's the planned minutes for that service? What's the outage minutes for that service? Do we want to report against this on a monthly basis or on a yearly basis? And actually, we can do it on an ad hoc basis as well. And it's this record that records those targets, and it also schedules the creation of what we call the target report. So because we're creating not just a single report, we're creating, for monthly, we're creating 12 different reports. We need to make sure they're scheduled and they're created automatically. Now, I could have taken the approach that they were manual and someone went in, created the report record, but I wanted to, automate as much as the process as I could. So hence the availability record is the record that controls it. You set the availability targets on there, and you set the schedule for when that next report record will be generated. So the target report is generated via a business rule from the availability record, and it's a scheduled business rule, and I'll talk about that. Or you can actually create those manually. It's this record that does the calculations. So it's this record that looks at all the outages that's associated during that period. So if it's a monthly target report, it will look at all those outages, and it will calculate the current overall outage and display it in terms of outage minutes and the percentage against that target. So that's the record that is done for the reporting. I've got an example. I will show you a little bit of the app as we go through, and that's the thing that you can display. So that's displaying your current performance against the target, and we've also included a RAG status in there as well. So that's the three records that we felt we needed to create this overall application. So just to give put it in a picture view, in the middle we kind of have the outage record. As I said earlier, this is fed manually or created manually. It can be created from an incident change or another record type if you like, and that can be obviously done by a business rule if you want to do that. The thing that we wanted to do with the outage record was to obviously associate that with a service. So we have a link to the actual service. And one of the things, and I'll talk about this in a moment when we talk about the challenges, is to make sure that we are associating that outage against the current target report. So the target report here. So again, if it's a monthly report, we want to make sure if it's the first of the month that we are counting those outages against that month's report. If it's yearly, obviously it's wider than that. So and I'll talk about this in a bit more detail, we made a relationship between the actual service and the outage record, and the actual service also contains information about what the current target report is. Okay, so which is the current report I should associate that outage against. So that's determined from the actual service, and that's actually updated when we create the target report from the availability control record. Talk more about challenges in a second. The target report, as I say, is the actual, what's our performance at the moment. on that record, I did add a few fields like who's the availability manager. I'll talk about thresholds a bit later on, but I kind of set some RAG thresholds against that as well. And although I didn't build this into the app, you could kind of think of the concept that maybe if you went to amber or definitely went to red, you would want to kind of kick off some investigation to understand, the root cause of why, why you failed to meet your availability target. So you can do that from that availability record, and that would also display all the outages that were associated with that. So having the outage record, you've got the traceability of the outage back to the incident or change or whatever entity you want. So from a single record, the target report, you can track all the way back to the outages or the incidents that actually caused that. And if you want to, you can, as I say, generate a problem, or you could even generate a change if you want to take, action to, prevent reoccurrence of that in the future. So that's kind of the, the high level overview of what we wanted to achieve. So now I just want to talk about four challenges that we came across, which I kind of think is worth sharing with you. Is the first one was, and I've kind of mentioned this already, was making sure that we associated the outage to the correct, target report. So as I said earlier, it's no good having, a one target report, because I want to roll that over monthly. So how do I make sure I'm doing that? So the approach we took was to, take advantage of the capabilities that we have to, associate record types to record types. So we actually felt the best way to achieve this was actually to record the information about the current availability report against the actual service CI. Okay, so that way, as soon as the outage was created, we could look at the service CI record, and from that we would pull back the current availability record, as you can see there, and then we can make that association. So in terms of the business rules that we had to do for this, I'm not going to go through all of these, but we created the relationship between the outage record and the target report record by looking at the associated actual service CI with the record and pulling that information back and making that association. Thereby, when the next target report gets created at the end of the month, the availability record gets updated within the service CI. So at all times we know we're updating the current target report. So quite simple to do, but we kind of had to think about it the best way of wanting to achieve that, and one of our design principles I mentioned earlier was, to not have reduce the manual steps as far as we could. So think about how we can actually automate that. So very simple, really using the power of, the ability to associate different records, and use the lookup. So, looking up from the actual service record, defining, finding the availability record, pulling it back, and making that association based on that. And that's all about that relationship down here. Create relationship type between the entity and the outage availability. That's how we did that. And we set the we did other business rules here, like set the availability record to that as well. Okay, so that was the first challenge that we wanted to overcome. So the second one was really around creating the target report. So as I've said, I wanted to reduce the amount of manual activity in this. So so we came up with the concept of creating a control record. As I said earlier, that control record record details of the target, the targets associated against that particular service. So it would have to be associated with the service, which is great because we're keeping that consistency across the whole thing. And I made use of the scheduled business rule. So I'm sure a lot of you are aware there's a scheduled business rule out there that you can use. It can be very useful in certain circumstances, and this was one of those. So I'm using that scheduled business rule to actually create the new report at the end of the month. Okay, so or the end of the year. So I can kind of set a parameter. I will say it's not perfect, but I can set a parameter of how many days till I create the next report, and that could be 31, 29, whatever. I also built in some fail safes that I automatically send a notification to the availability manager to say the new report's been created, and they can go and manually adjust it if they want to. So there's some. It's not perfect because I'm basing it on days. I haven't really got a calendar like in Outlook to say on the last day of the month. I'm using days, but I built in some fail safe around that. So so using the scheduled business rule is quite straightforward to use. In our case, we were checking a number of fields, and we were checking dates, and then really we were just executing the creation of the report. But we were also, as you can see here, we were keeping a counter of how many reports have been created. So anyone looking at the control record can not only see the targets, they can see how many target reports were created, because we're creating an association between those two records, and see how many of those reports were created. So providing all that information. The other part of so that's the scheduled business rule. The other part we wanted to do, and this goes back to challenge number one, was to actually make sure that we updated, when we created the next report, that we updated that information in the actual service CI. So again, we're just using on related records. We're setting the availability record within it. So again, making sure when the outage comes in, we're recording it against that outage. So the two things on here, making use of the scheduled rule, pretty powerful. Yeah, we had to tweak it a bit. We had to create some fail safes, really good still. And also using the related records on related record of type actual service to make sure we were updating that with the correct information. So that was the kind of second challenge that we looked at. The third one was calculating availability. And I guess when I first embarked on this, you tend to kind of think, well, there's no availability business rules available. How am I going to do that? Don't I need an availability? Wouldn't that be good to have an availability one? But actually, when I started thinking about it, it's just a number. Okay, so if you think about it that in those terms, yes, it's a number. It's a number expressed as a percentage, so between 1 and 100. So if we start thinking about it in those terms, what we can actually do is not only in some examples of some of the business rules within the application here, some of them are kind of setting the overall outage minutes. You'll notice these are kind of duplicated because I'm doing it for either yearly or monthly. So there's some kind of business rules or there's some conditions I check around that. But basically, I'm calculating what is the current outage minutes. Once I've got that, and I'm getting that from my outage records, then really the percentage, I'm setting the percentage year to date or month to date, and really it's just maths, right? So it's just using maths to calculate the percentage, taking into account what my target is, you know, and I've got that already. I know what my target is and what my actual outage minutes is, and expressing that as a percentage. So although at the outset I thought, how am I going to do that? You know, if you kind of break it or boil it down or break it down, it's maths. So, and if it's maths and you're setting number fields, numeric fields, I used numeric fields for this just to make sure you can do these calculations very easily. Okay, so even though it was a challenge, it wasn't so much a challenge in terms of the business rule, the construction of the business rule. It was more thinking, you know, about what could be achieved with what we have within the business rules today. So they were the three ones, the three main ones. The other things I want to cover off were the other considerations, kind of challenges, but more considerations. A lot of people always, you know, when we think of targets these days, everyone likes, well, a lot of people think in terms of RAG status, so red, amber, green. So I kind of wanted to replicate that level of thinking. So what I did quite simply was create a new field for the status. And again, once I've calculated my availability, which is just a number, I can then apply some logic, some business rules against that around setting the status. What I didn't want to do was to hard code anything in there, so I kind of made it, you know, pretty simple actually. And if you look at these three business rules around green, amber, and red, if it's 100%, it's green. That's pretty obvious. It's green. If it goes under 100%, then but not, and you'll see the red one in a second. If it's under 100%, then I want to set it amber. Yeah, I set it amber. If it's less than the target, then I need to set it red. So the way the order those business rules are displayed there is important. So as it goes through, as SMAX will process it, it will process it as green. It may process as amber, but then the next one will process it as red. So that's the way I kind of went about it. Was again not hard code it, kind of keep it simple. Once I defined this status, then I could start. Then I wanted to use the status to start driving notifications. So in the app, I created a number of notifications. If a target report went to amber, I would automatically email the availability manager and inform them of that. The same for red. Obviously, it's just a business rule which is triggering those notifications, and you can trigger them to go, on different parameters, as you know. But so that's why status was important for notifications, but also for what I wanted to do in terms of displaying this information. So I'm going to show you this live in a second, but I wanted to think about reporting as well. So how would I bring this to life? It's quite a dull subject, availability sometimes. So to bring it to life, to be able to display it and maybe have it on wall boards, etc. I needed to consider reporting. So this is a kind of layout of a dashboard that I've created. What's great now with the latest release, where you can define your own dashboards, even better, you can have your availability management dashboard as a separate one. And I think that may be one of your upcoming topic on one of the future user group sessions would be around that. But even better now that we can define those dashboards for those particular purposes, groups, people, etc. So this is an example. I'm going to show you this live now. So let me just stop sharing PowerPoint and go into my SMAX tenant. So this is just refresh just to make sure I haven't timed out. So this is one of my SMAX demo tenants, which has got the app loaded on that. As you can see here, this is dashboard layout. This hasn't been updated to the latest release, so you don't see the stuff on the left-hand side. But what you're seeing here is really a list of 2 monthly service availability things, target reports that I'm measuring against. You can have, loads if you wanted. You're not limited. You can see the service. You can see the report name. I use the business rule to auto-generate some of the report name based on the date. I can see where I am in terms of month-to-date percentage. I can see the target. I can see any outage minutes against that. So pretty standard stuff in terms of reporting. I can see the status. This is the RAG status. I'd love, and I did try and think of ways that I could make it red, amber, and green, but unfortunately it's that at the moment. So that kind of displays your monthly service availability. Yearly works exactly the same way. These just happen to be yearly reports rather than monthly reports. And of course, I can put report widgets on here around outages. There's some outage information from the outage record. So I'm just going to kind of show you quickly how this all hangs together. So if I go into availability, obviously, consider roles and, your role-based access around this as well. I'm logged as an administrator, so I can see everything. But, if you were to implement this in your own environments, I think I'll make some recommendations and around roles and all that within the app as well. You may not want everybody having access to all these records. The availability manager, yes, but maybe the outage record wider. But some of these would certainly be read only. So let me start here with the outage record, and I'm just going to create one manually. So very quickly, very simple record. Need to give it a title, and I'm going to create an outage against Adobe Creative Cloud. I've got a drop down here, just a very standard drop down, incident or request. Doesn't do any more than that. It's just really for recording information against that, and then I can define my start time. So I can maybe that time, and on the same day, maybe just a 2-hour outage. So between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. I have an outage. Okay, I said earlier, these can be created automatically from your instance, changes, whatever, using business rules. I'm just going to create this manually for now. So what you can see here is this is what the outage record looks like. You can see the service it's associated with. You can actually see the availability record, availability records it's associated with. Impact start and end, outage source, and it's calculated. Obviously, that's just a 60-minute outage. And what you see down here is where we have built the association between the outage and the target report. So the current target report for Adobe Creative Cloud is this one. It was automatically generated. I actually generate this on a daily basis just for demonstration purposes, and that's the current report that it's been associated with. If I go quickly back to here, back to my dashboards, you can actually already see that the Adobe Creative Cloud is now an amber, because we now have an outage against that, albeit an hour. I'm still, my month to date is 99.99. I won't read the whole number out, but it's 99.99. So I'm still within my target range and so far I've got only 60 minutes against that. So the availability manager would automatically at this point receive an email, and obviously this has changed on there as well. If I just go back and create another one very quickly, I'll make an outage short change. It really makes no difference, and this time I'm gonna put a really big outage in there. Okay, if I do a save and edit again, and let's look at the record. Again, it's calculated the outage minutes. It's still associated with that target report record. If I go back to my dashboard and just refresh that, it has it's still amber. Obviously, my target 99. I might set my it hasn't gone under 99. So I have a lot of outage minutes that are available against that. But really want to illustrate here, it's calculating those outage minutes month to date there as well, and you can see the ongoing month to date minutes. So that was the outage record. I'm going to kind of show you the target report record, and this is what that report is based on. So we can see here that the status is amber, the report type is monthly, the availability record, which I'll show you in a second, that's the target, these are the allowed minutes, these are the total minutes, and kind of from here I can see the information here. They're my two outages that have been associated with this target report. So they're the ones that are being taken into that calculation. Now, I said earlier I haven't locked all these fields down. I have on the app, but if you're wondering why would you go in and change these, you shouldn't. These should be and will be read-only fields. You wouldn't expect anyone really to come in and adjust those. So this is the obviously the report, the record that we're reporting against. But if we go to the availability report, which is the control report, which I can link to very easily from here, and I'll take you to that. So this is the control record. It's got a name. It's got a target. It's got a report name. I can set things like who's the availability manager, required for the notifications. Report type is monthly. Frequency 1. So this means I'm actually creating a target report every day. Now, I've just done this, for demonstration purposes more than anything else. But, from that, I can see, if I want to, all the previous 457 availability reports that I've created automatically, and I could go down into those if I wanted to. If I look at targets, these are the targets. These are the targets that I set on that, and that are replicated down to the target report record. So this is the control record. This is where I set those, and they're pretty simply just copied down to the target report record when that is scheduled, when that's created via the schedule. Just a couple of other things on here. These are just, I guess, nice to have. If you've got availability management processes, you might want to set review dates and reviews associated with that. So just finally on here, obviously this availability record is associated with the actual service. So if I now look at the actual service, you can see here that I've got my availability record listed there. Again, this is the one that's used when the outage is created to make sure I'm creating it against the right one. But you have the ability to link all the way through from the availability record to the target report record to the outage to the actual service. It really, for me, highlights the power of being able to, associate those records, and me as maybe an availability manager or a service level manager being able to see all that in a single place. So that's a high level overview. As I said, I didn't really want to focus too much on the business rules today, but just some of the challenges and some of the business rules that we created to meet that challenge. Overall, I when I was preparing this presentation, I kind of looked back at the business rules that I created, and for what is, I think, a pretty cool app, and the outcome being that, and with 3 record types, there's only about, across all 3 records, about 16 business rules. So I'm pretty proud of myself for that. That it looks, it's doing what I set out to do. The objective was to display things in terms of percentage. The way we did it, I think, makes it clean and makes it flexible in terms of the outage record, having the control record, being able to report monthly, yearly, or daily in some cases. But when you break it down, as I say, there are only about 16 business rules needed to achieve that. So that's it, really. That's what I wanted to kind of show you all today. Yeah, so producer Dean, you got lots of questions, you promised?
Yeah, I got a couple of questions, but we did have a question from Roberta, and she's asked a question about maintenance windows. So did you, with the app or with the setup that you have accommodated for maintenance windows for availability?
In a word, no. So it's something that I did consider, did think about, but my primary one was to get what you've shown up there. Yeah, it's something that certainly a good idea for version 3 of the app to look into how we would achieve that. So I think it's a good idea. It's not something that's been taken into this particular version.
I guess the way that I would look at this would be, typically with a maintenance window that's related to where it's change. So you're more likely to have that as something you're recording against the change records themselves. And because you're creating the outage record off the change, and obviously, as you said, although you were creating those records manually, you can automate that. So have it as a business rule on change that says, if we trigger an outage, it does it there. You could probably do something at the change level to kind of say, it's during a maintenance window, therefore I'm not going to create the outage record.
Well, I think you're right. I think it's during the maintenance window is one check. The other check, even if it was in a maintenance window, but you overrun your planned versus actual, okay, is that, if you said to the business you're only going to take it down for an hour and you took it down for 2 hours, okay, it may still be in the maintenance window. Do you count that? That's where the murky world of availability management and service level management comes into its fore. What do you count as unavailable? I used to have lots of debates about that in companies I've worked for in the past. What constitutes unavailability?
That's good. That's good. And you're right. It is very, very different from different companies. I didn't hear you mention it earlier on, but I just wanted to double check. Obviously, you've got the drop down flag related to incident and change, and I think that's just like a standard list field, right? It's not.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So, but the idea behind that was to identify where that outage has come from. So I guess if you had some kind of event monitoring type tools out there, you could have that potentially create the outage records automatically through the API, through a REST API call or something, and utilize that as a way to record it within SMAX as well.
So you could bypass the incident. You could, as you say, using REST, just create an outage record directly from an event. You'd want to think about that a lot. You wouldn't want to create an outage record for every single event. Depend on your event management solution. And actually, when even though we've created this app, often I think the best way to actually, determine true availability is to use things like, real user monitoring, synthetic monitoring to actually calculate things. What I've created is availability based on records, be it, as incidents and changes, as you say, could be events. A lot of organizations that, that we work with are using our kind of RUM technology to actually calculate that, synthetically, and report against that rather than use outage records, because it can become, a bit of a bit subjective. Did it affect this? Did it affect that? What time? There's more that you can automate with those tools, the better. But yes, you're absolutely right. You could create an outage record directly in there, no problem, and then you could flag it as event. And that's why I put that source on there, actually, because you might be interested in, are outages really coming from events, or incidents or changes? I think it's quite interesting information for an availability manager.
Yeah, no, that's good. It's good. A couple of other things that kind of, I guess, some of these are kind of questions, maybe suggestions for a V3. But obviously, one of the things that you highlighted was about the fact that your availability reports are kind of based on days. I do know from a bit of a history with when we discussed when you were working on this some time ago about whether there was potential ways that we could tie it to specifically months or years. And I did have a chat with Brindus, and we do think it may be possible. So we can certainly circle back around that one and see what we can do there.
I remember us having conversations about that. It got quite deep at one point.
Yes.
So we and that's why I kind of created the fail safe by, as soon as a report is created, I notify the availability manager, sort of thing, so they can adjust it. So that's kind of the workaround for now.
Okay, no, that's good. And I think the other thing as well was, which kind of seems a potential option as well. And again, it comes down to, what you would build in an app, and then also how you would then extend it within, how you would use it within an organization. Is whilst you've got those availability reports, which have got, obviously, as you say, you flagged it as red, amber, green, so a classic RAG status. Obviously, in different companies, they might use different terminology, so it doesn't need to be that. They might treat things as, caution, everything's okay, okay, caution, warning, whatever for those. But I guess the other thing that you could do, because you have that relationship, the multi-dimensional relationships, is you could actually post those updates back up to the services records to a degree as well. So when people are working on, when there's an incident, or where there's, maybe where a change is going to occur, and potentially where that change, say, maybe outside of a standard maintenance window, you could flag something on the change because you've got that reference on the service that's saying caution, right? And maybe that in itself could potentially trigger additional approvals through the change process.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, but I would say one of the challenges is knowing where to stop. And we could pass the data all over the place. Where is the best place for that data to be consumed? And you're absolutely right. That may be better on the actual service, because then an incident would link to the actual service, etc. Yeah, it's thinking about the data and where that be consumed. But the model or the concept that we've created allows for that flexibility. And I think that's the main thing.
And I think that was the point I wanted to make was, this is really about, making sure, showing that you got the flexibility there with what you've built, but also, obviously with the way that we've showcased apps and built apps in the past, is trying to make them very, should we say, self-contained or a starter, because we know, obviously, and as you pointed out about your background with availability management, everyone is kind of different. So you need to cover the bases enough with something out of the box, which you can then, or should we say, an app out of the box, and then be able to extend that out based on your individual business needs within your organization.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Casey's just posted out about a potential future enhancement. So I think you're in trouble now, Nev, because it looks like V3 may need to be created. She's posted ability to spread to other affected services. So if an associated CI is down, in addition to the divine service in the incident or change. So, I think can't quite remember if you mentioned this earlier on, but I know we've talked about some of the flexibility with building out the separate outage records. Is in an incident record, you would potentially spawn multiple outage records to accommodate that kind of thing.
You could, but if you think about an incident record, and the out-of-the-box incident record has a start and an end time. There's a flag that says outage start, outage. Well, whether there's an outage and then it's outage start and outage end. But in my experience, if you have an incident that affects multiple services, one service may be recovered before another one. So they may not all be 1 hour or 2 minutes or whatever. So yes, I think, having the ability, the flexibility to create outage records automatically is good, but, and there's the big but, and this where unfortunately, manual intervention may come in and say, actually, well, the exchange service was only down for 10 minutes, right? So we can only count 10 minutes against that. With the outage record, you could actually adjust that manually. So I cater for that, but it's a difficult topic. If you automate everything, it's, then you have multiple outages against the incident record on the incident record, and you don't really want to do that. That becomes complicated. So you're right, Casey, but it's one of those, you work through the use case and actually see in reality, yes, create multiple outage records, but there still may be some manual intervention required if necessary.
That's great. That's great, Nev. So, one last question from myself, and then we'll close the session. It was really more about, obviously this is V2, and obviously V1 is available today, and people can go and look at that. It's not a question about when this is going to be available, because that is something obviously we're going to plan and try and get organised to be done as soon as possible. It was more about that kind of the thinking around, you created a V1 and that initial kind of setup, right? So going back to that, how you did it on day one, and then that incremental mentally thinking about it incrementally, how to improve it and go forward as an overall design approach. Do you feel, I guess my thought process around this, which is a little bit disjointed, is I guess in some regards, when it comes to building studio apps or building again with catalog offerings, sometimes it's kind of a case of just getting the initial concept in play to kind of get your head around how you can then extend it, kind of thing. So and then incrementally improve over time. Would that be a fair comment?
Yeah, I think I always had in mind that to me an outage is a kind of useful record, but it's not that useful unless you're using it, right? So I always had in mind that I wanted to use that outage record to do something. So I may not have had the full concept that I put up on the screen now, but it gave me that foundation to do that by making that link between the outage and the actual service, building that up. Then it's how I make use of that, and the classic use case is the one I've demonstrated today, which is around availability. So yeah, building up from the foundation, but for me, I still had in mind there was more than just an outage record, for sure, right? It's how we use that.
Okay, great. I think for me, I think it's been really good to see this and go into sort of understand how you've gone about it, and then look at how you've built it out and identified those challenges. Look at those challenges and then identified the best way forward. So it's really good to see it, and as someone that saw some of the evolution in the past, it's I think it's a fantastic piece of work. So thanks, Nev, for that, and thanks for the session. Yeah, so just as a final wrap up, then we'll wrap up now. So just as a reminder, with the registrations, we do recommend you create your own recurring calendar appointment, because when you register, you only get the first appointment in the series. Hopefully that's something we can solve soon with the platform, and we'll get there. But do remember that, obviously, so that you get a reminder about the next session that's planned. Next slide. And speaking of dashboards and reporting, next session on the 23rd of June, we're going to do a spotlight on multiple dashboards. So the new feature that came out as part of the 2021-05 release with the multiple dashboards, and similar to what Nev mentioned about potentially creating things like an availability dashboard that you can share out amongst groups of people. We'll be talking about that and going into a bit of detail and some of the configurability and how it works in that session. July the 7th, we'll be doing an office hours session, if you have any questions, get them lined up for then. But obviously, you're always welcome to use the community, post on the community, and ask questions there as well. And then on July the 23rd, we'll be doing the it's that time already, the SMAX 2021-08 release readiness. So we'll be doing the session then about what will be coming out in our August release. And that one should be a very interesting session for those that are interested around Portal and how things look and theming. But that's all I'm going to say. So thank you very much for your time today. We appreciate you listening. I certainly appreciate listening to Nev and showcasing that. And if any of you are interested in being in one of these sessions, please reach out. We'd love to have you talk about your experiences with SMAX. But with that, I thank you for today, and speak to you soon. Goodbye.